Moving into a new foster home wasn't anything new to me. After years of bouncing around, the routine had become predictable. A caseworker would drive me to a new place, exchange pleasantries with the new guardians, and leave me to figure out the rest. But as soon as I stepped into Mark and Evelyn's home, I knew something was off. The air inside was immaculate, as if untouched by everyday life. Every surface was spotless, from the pristine white walls to the flawless wooden floors that didn't have a single scuff. Even the couch cushions sat unnaturally neat, untouched by use. It lacked any personal touch, feeling sterile and impersonal. "Ethan," Evelyn greeted me with a wide smile. Her voice carried warmth, but it had an uncanny precision, like practiced lines. Mark stood beside her, tall and broad-shouldered, his expression calm but unreadable. When he shook my hand, his handshake held a subtle challenge, firm and lingering. "We're so glad to have you here," Evelyn continued. "This is a place of order, Ethan, and we believe that's the key to a happy life." Mark nodded. "You'll find it's easy to adjust, as long as you follow the expectations." Expectations. That word immediately made me wary, but I smiled back and nodded, gripping the handle of my duffel bag a little tighter. Evelyn led me through the house, her steps light and precise. "This is the living room, where we like to spend family time," she said, motioning to an uninviting space, stripped down to the bare essentials. Not a single photo or personal touch hung on the walls. "And this is the kitchen," she continued, gesturing to a gleaming white countertop with perfectly arranged jars of sugar and flour. "Dinner's at 6 sharp every night." Mark stayed back, his eyes weighing every move I made. I tried not to look back at him. Finally, Evelyn opened a door at the end of the hall. "This is your room," she said brightly. The room was small but functional. A twin bed with a gray comforter, a wooden desk, and a dresser. Sitting neatly on the bed was a laminated sheet of paper. I picked it up, reading over the text. "House rules. Clean up after yourself. No loud noises after 9 o'clock. Always ask permission before leaving your room. Do not enter the basement. If the lights flicker, stay where you are until the flickering stops." "These are the house rules," Evelyn said, her tone almost cheerful. "They're simple, really. Just follow them and you'll fit in perfectly here." Mark's voice came from the doorway. "We've found that order is good for young men like yourself." The two of them stared at me, waiting for a response. "Okay," I said, my voice quiet. "I can do that." They exchanged a glance, their smiles matching exactly, like rehearsed gestures, before leaving me to unpack. As I set my bag down and looked around the room, the laminated list stayed in my hand. The rules appeared straightforward at first glance, but some of them, like staying where you are if the lights flicker or the prohibition on entering the basement, left a heavy unease settling in my gut. By the second day, I realized the rules weren't suggestions. They were absolute. Everything about life in the house felt planned out, like there was no room for messing up. Mark and Evelyn weren't strict in the way I was used to. They didn't yell or get angry. But the way they watched me, like they were always paying attention, made it clear. They'd notice every mistake. I broke a rule the second evening without meaning to. Dinner had been weirdly quiet again. The only sounds were forks on plates and Evelyn's careful chewing. After we ate, I left my plate in the sink and went back to my room, forgetting to rinse it and put it in the dishwasher. The next morning, I found the plate sitting on my nightstand. There were still bits of mashed potato stuck to it, dried up on the edges. A sticky note was attached. Rule #1, clean up after yourself. At breakfast, neither Mark nor Evelyn said a word about it. They acted normal, but something about them felt colder. Evelyn gave me less food than usual, and her smile seemed tighter, almost fake. Mark didn't look at me much at all. I felt like my throat was tight. It wasn't about the plate. It was the way they made their point without saying anything, like a reminder that they were always watching me. Over the next few days, I saw how specific their rules really were. I tried to follow them, but it wasn't always easy. One night, I was reading at my desk and forgot to turn off the lamp before 9. The next morning, I found the bulb unscrewed and lying next to the lamp, with the cord neatly looped. When I left my shoes by the door, instead of lining them up on the mat, they disappeared overnight. "Has anyone seen my shoes?" I asked at breakfast, trying to sound casual. Mark looked up from his coffee. "Things that aren't where they're supposed to be don't stick around here," he said flatly. Evelyn's smile didn't change. "That's just how things work here. You'll get used to it." But the basement rule was the one that got to me the most. I couldn't stop thinking about it, especially at night when I heard a steady humming noise coming from below. It wasn't loud, but it didn't stop. It almost sounded like a machine, and I kept wondering what was down there. One night when the house was quiet, I left my room and went to the basement door. The humming was louder now, and I could feel it faintly through the floor. I reached for the doorknob, but it wouldn't move. Locked. "What are you doing?" Evelyn's voice made me jump. She was standing in the hallway, her face lit by the dim light overhead. She was smiling, but her eyes looked cold. "I thought I heard something," I said quickly. Her smile stayed the same. "Houses make noises, Ethan. It's best not to think about them too much." She walked me back to my room, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "You're doing well," she said, her voice way too nice, like she was pretending. "We're proud of you." But the way she said it didn't feel real, like she'd practiced it 100 times before. The rules weren't just rules. They were how things worked here, enforced so tightly it was impossible to ignore. The more I tried to adjust, the harder it got to breathe in that house. But even then, I couldn't stop myself from pushing back just a little. Not anything big, just small acts of rebellion to feel like I had some control. One night, I left a glass of water on my desk instead of bringing it back to the kitchen. The next morning, it was gone. In its place was a folded note that said, "Rule 1, clean up after yourself." It wasn't just about the glass. It was how precise it all was. They didn't just take it. They left a message to remind me they'd noticed. At first, the house had seemed weird but harmless. Now it felt like a trap. Every move I made was being watched. I couldn't stop thinking about the basement door. That faint humming I kept hearing at night was getting louder, and it wasn't random. It had a steady rhythm, almost like a machine. But sometimes I wondered if it was something alive. One evening after dinner, I stayed near the basement door, listening. The humming was steady, almost calming, but it made me feel uneasy. I reached out and let my hand hover over the doorknob. "What are you doing?" Mark's voice broke the quiet, sharp and sudden. I turned and saw him standing a few feet away. He looked calm, but his eyes were colder than usual. "I thought I heard something," I said quickly. He tilted his head a little, studying me. "Houses make noises," he said, just like Evelyn had. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, like a warning. You shouldn't mess with things like that. He didn't yell or punish me, but the way he stood there, blocking the hallway, made it clear I wasn't supposed to touch the basement door again. After that, the punishments got more personal. One morning, my shoes were gone because I'd left them in the wrong spot again. Evelyn handed them back to me with a smile, but her eyes didn't match. "We all make mistakes," she said, her voice way too sweet. "But we learn from them, don't we?" What she said didn't feel comforting. It felt like a warning. I started noticing other things, too, the way Mark and Evelyn always moved together like they were part of the same machine. How they'd finish each other's sentences like they'd practiced it. How they always smiled, but it never felt real. It was all fake. I didn't know what they were hiding, but I knew one thing. This wasn't a normal family. I couldn't keep it in anymore. One night at dinner, the silence was too much. It felt like the air itself was pressing down on me. "Why do you have so many rules?" I asked, sharper than I meant to. "What's in the basement?" The room froze. Evelyn stopped mid-bite, her fork halfway to her plate. Mark put his knife down slowly and stared at me. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. "The rules are to help you," Mark said. "They keep everything running smoothly." "And the basement?" I pressed. Evelyn smiled, but it was colder this time. "The basement is for family stuff, Ethan. You'll see when it's time." I wanted to push more, to make them answer me, but the way they stared shut me up. My appetite was gone, and I said I needed to go to my room. That night I couldn't sleep. What did they mean by "you'll see when it's time"? What were they planning? I stared at the ceiling, and their words just kept playing in my head. Something bad was going to happen. I could feel it. The announcement came the next morning over breakfast. Evelyn served pancakes, placing the syrup bottle just right by my plate. Mark carefully put his napkin on his lap and looked at me with that calm, cold stare he always had. "We've decided to take a family trip," he said. His voice sounded nice, but his eyes were as cold as ever. "You've been doing well adjusting, and we think a change of scenery will help." "A trip?" I asked, my fork pausing halfway to my mouth. "Where?" Evelyn tilted her head, her smile glued in place. "It's a surprise, dear. Pack light. You won't need much." I nodded, but my stomach felt like it was twisting in knots. Something about the way they said it didn't feel right. It wasn't excitement on their faces. It was control. After breakfast, Evelyn handed me a small duffel bag. "This should be enough for your essentials," she said with her usual fake cheerfulness. "We'll be leaving in an hour." I packed like they told me to, but the bad feeling wouldn't go away. The basement, the rules, the punishments, none of it made sense. And now, they wanted to take me somewhere? My hands were shaking as I zipped up the bag. Whatever this trip was, it wasn't a vacation. The drive was long and way too quiet. Mark and Evelyn whispered to each other up front, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. I stared out the window, watching as the familiar streets disappeared. Soon we were on the highway, passing signs I didn't recognize. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You'll see," Evelyn said without looking back. Her voice sounded cheerful, but it didn't help me feel better. Hours passed, and the view outside turned into nothing but empty roads and trees. The branches looked dead, sticking out like broken arms under the gray sky. I wanted to ask more questions, but the heavy silence stopped me. Finally, we pulled into a small private airport. It looked almost deserted, with just a few workers walking around. Mark handed a man some tickets, and they led us toward a sleek, unmarked plane. "Why are we flying alone?" I asked, my voice cracking a little. "Flying private is easier," Mark said flatly. "We can focus better this way." That didn't make me feel any better, but I didn't argue. My legs didn't want to move as I climbed onto the plane. Everything in me was telling me to run, but where could I go? The plane was smaller than I expected, with just enough seats for a few people. Evelyn handed me a bottle of water and a small snack as we sat down. "Go ahead and drink," she said, her grin stretching wider than usual. "Staying hydrated is important." I hesitated, staring at the bottle. Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. Mark leaned toward me. "It's just water. You'll feel fine after a drink." Reluctantly, I took a sip. It tasted faintly metallic, but before I could think about it, my eyelids grew heavy and things started to get fuzzy. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Evelyn's grin, stretched so wide it didn't even look real. I woke up to the sound of grinding metal. My head pounded, and my mouth felt like sandpaper. Blinking, I tried to make sense of where I was. The air was heavy and smelled like old metal and grease. I wasn't on the plane anymore. I didn't even think I was above ground. The room was dimly lit, with flickering fluorescent lights overhead. I lay on a cold metal cot, the surface digging into my back. My clothes were gone. Instead, I was wearing a scratchy, baggy uniform that rubbed uncomfortably against my skin. I sat up, my head spinning, and looked around. The room was filled with rows of identical cots, each with someone in the same uniform. The people moved slowly, their faces blank. A low, endless hum buzzed through the walls, constant and unrelenting. "Where am I?" I muttered under my breath, barely loud enough to hear myself. No one answered. The others shuffled past like they weren't even awake, their eyes empty. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like jelly, like I hadn't moved in forever. Gripping the edge of the cot, I forced myself to my feet. Suddenly, a loudspeaker crackled to life, its voice garbled and impossible to understand. The others didn't hesitate. They lined up at a doorway on the far side of the room, moving in perfect sync. I stayed frozen, unsure of what to do, until I felt a sharp jab in my back. "Move," someone growled. I turned to see a man in a different uniform. He held a baton in one hand and motioned toward the line with the other. His face was blank, and dark glasses hid his eyes. Swallowing hard, I joined the line. My stomach twisted as we were led into a massive room full of conveyor belts and clanging machines. Workers stood at each station, putting together small parts I didn't recognize. The air smelled like burning metal, and the noise was so loud it made my ears ring. A guard handed me a small tool and pointed at an empty station. "Work," he said. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice unsteady. The guard didn't respond. He slammed the baton against the table in front of me, the sound making me jump. I nodded quickly and turned to the conveyor belt. The parts rolling by were tiny and complicated. I fumbled with them, my hands shaking so much the tool slipped more than once. Each mistake made the guards glance my way, tapping their batons against their legs like a warning. Hours passed. Or maybe it was days. I couldn't tell anymore. Time didn't seem to matter here. The work never stopped. The noise never ended. And my back ached from standing so long. Then I saw him. Across the room, at another station, was a boy I recognized immediately. He looked different. His face was thinner, his eyes hollow. But it was him. He was a quiet kid who'd been at the foster home before me. He left about a year ago. Now he was here, moving like a robot, fitting parts together without even looking up. "Hey," I whispered, glancing around to make sure no guards were nearby. "Hey, it's Ethan." He didn't react. He didn't blink. It was like he didn't recognize me or didn't care. The truth slammed into me, leaving me breathless. Mark and Evelyn hadn't just done this to me. They'd done it before. They were sending foster kids here, erasing them from the world. And I was just the latest in a long line of victims. Each day felt endless in the factory, every moment repeating like a nightmare on loop. Every waking second was spent at the assembly line, the constant hum of the machines crawling into my brain and never letting up. My body ached from the repetitive tasks, my hands red, raw, and blistered. The guards were always watching, their batons tapping against their palms, silently warning us not to mess up. Escape wasn't just impossible. It felt unthinkable. The walls were thick, solid concrete, with no windows to let in any light. Every door had a guard in front of it, and they never looked away. The other workers moved like they were on autopilot. They didn't talk, didn't even glance at me. Their eyes were empty, and it felt like they'd been here so long they didn't remember how to be people anymore. I started losing track of time. Maybe days had passed, maybe weeks. It didn't matter. My routine was always the same. Wake up, work, eat some bland, tasteless meal, and go back to the cot. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, smothering any thought of escape. It wasn't just my body that felt trapped. It was like my mind was being squeezed too, like the factory was swallowing me whole. Then one day, something different happened. While I stood at my station, a girl was brought into the room. She couldn't have been older than 10. She wore the same rough uniform we all had, her wide eyes darting around the factory, taking it all in. She looked terrified. When a guard barked an order at her, she flinched hard, her whole body trembling, as she shuffled over to an empty station near mine. I felt a tight, awful feeling in my chest. They were still bringing in new kids. It hit me all at once, sharp and clear. Mark and Evelyn weren't just foster parents. They were part of something much bigger, something that preyed on kids like me. They'd been doing this for years, cycling through foster kids and tossing them aside like broken tools when they were no longer useful. My mind went back to the night I arrived at their house. Evelyn's warm smile, her kind voice promising stability, it was all fake, a lie. I could picture them now, back at home, going on with their perfect lives like nothing had happened. They'd probably already reported me as a runaway. Their story would be flawless. Photos from the fake vacation, receipts from places they'd never actually been, and Evelyn's polished, caring performance. "We're heartbroken," she'd say, her voice shaking just enough to make it believable. "We tried everything, but he was just too troubled." Mark would nod, his hand on her shoulder. "We just wanted to give him a chance." And everyone would believe them. People like Mark and Evelyn didn't raise suspicion. They were too perfect, too polished. That night, as I sat on the cold cot with the factory lights buzzing faintly above me, I felt like there was no way out. I was nothing now, just another nameless face in the system, like the boy I'd recognized at the assembly line. Somewhere, another foster kid was walking into their house. They'd see those fake smiles and hear those empty promises, thinking they'd finally found safety. But before they knew it, they'd end up here just like me. The cycle wouldn't stop. No one was looking for us. No one cared. As the lights dimmed for the night, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. The hum of the machines echoed in the background, a constant reminder of the life I'd never escape. Mark and Evelyn's lies were perfect, their alibis airtight. And me? I was just another ghost in the trail they left behind.